All right, guys, so we're gonna come to our mat. And we're gonna start with bent knees, laying down nice and flat on your back. We'll create that little gap at the small of the back and find that neutral pelvis where if you can feel your hip bones and know where the pubic bone is in relation to your hip bones, your ASIS, we want to keep them all on the same plane. So we're not in a posterior tilt with our low back flat and our pubic bone, our tailbone reaching up. And we're not heavy to the tailbone with our hip bones up here, these ASIS higher than the pubic bone, tailbone with that rib flare. We want to find that nice neutral position. And if you need to, you can rock a little bit, tilt the hips back, find that deep flexion so you feel what that posterior tilt feels like, and then rock into extension so you feel that anterior, that forward tilt of the top of the hips towards the thighs. And you can kind of rock and kind of settle into it a little bit more. The flexion extension is nice because you can work into a nice stretch along those muscles up and down the lumbar spine. As we go into extension, you can feel the upper parts of the hamstring start to open up and stretch this top section that connects into the glutes. And then a few of those, we'll just find our nice neutral position. Arms are going to reach long down by our side. We're going to bring our right leg up to tabletop. Light pressure in that left foot pushing down against the mat. And we'll send the right leg forward. And we're going to hold it out for about a 3 to 5 count so we can feel that engagement throughout the leg and that opening in the hip, creating some air there in the hip. And then bringing that knee back. I'm going to create a bit more flexion out of the hip without any movement in the spine. And then we extend out. We hold and brace, pushing that leg out nice and strong. And then we're going to bend the knee, create a little bit more flexion at the hip. So we go past 90 if you can. And then we'll press and extend and lengthen. Good tension in the leg. Pulling that knee in past 90 if you can for this last one. And we'll bring that right foot down to the mat in line with your sit bone. Left leg comes to tabletop. We find that balance between the hips, the rib cage, and the shoulders. And we extend the left leg out nice and long, good extension. Without the hip moving away from the rib cage, we keep that symmetry between the right and the left. And then we draw that knee in deep. And we extend the leg out. I'm holding the extension for about 3 to 5 seconds so I can feel that extra length, make sure I got full extension of the knee. I'm in plantar flexion with the toes pointing, but you can always go to dorsiflexion, driving through the heel if you want to. You can play around with the foot position. But ideally, we're keeping a nice neutral pelvis. The low back isn't shifting from flexion to extension. And we'll go for 2 more with this left leg, reaching out nice and strong, full extension of that leg. And the foot will come back down to the mat. I'm going to rock the hips a bit to go back into a pelvic tilt. So we're in that lumbar flexion, that hollowing, that C curve, and then rock onto the tailbone, anchoring the shoulder girdle, the shoulder blades. You're going to get a little bit of rib flare, a little bit of mid-upper back extension, as well as into the low back, and then rocking back into that pelvic tilt. Find finding that neutral spine, neutral hip position. Fingers will interlace, and we'll bring our hands back behind the head to support the head and the neck as you slide the shoulders down. We're going to fold at the mid-ribs, at the mid-back. We're coming up into our chest lift. We fold there at the mid-back, just below the shoulder blades. We hold for a moment before slowly resetting down to the floor. Elbows are within your line of sight. They're not too flared out to the side. Otherwise, the lats take over. It's hard to get up into that chest lift. You should be able to see your elbows within your periphery. All of the movement in the spine is coming from one place in the back. We're not adding more movement from our low back. Hips are not tilting and tipping and twisting out of position. I've got some pressure at the bottom of my feet, so I can plant my feet, engage the back of the legs. Can feel the hamstrings fire a bit, helps me connect more to my abdominals. Folding and lifting, we're gonna hold this nice chest lift. Let's bring our right leg up to tabletop, holding the lift in the upper back, and we extend that right leg out and pull it back in. You could go past 90 as long as your hips and back don't change position. Slow and controlled. Finding that clean line of extension of the leg as it drives forward, straightening the knee. And the foot comes down to the floor, down to the mat, and left leg up to tabletop and extend. Finding that full extension of the leg. We feel the quad fire as the knee straightens. You can bring the knee towards you closer, creating more flexion at the hip. Again, as long as your low back and your hips don't change their position, we maintain stable, maintain neutral. Left foot comes to the floor in line with your sit bone, folding a little deeper at the mid-ribs to create some more flexion through the mid-back, and we're gonna twist and tilt over onto that right shoulder blade towards your right underarm, and we come through to center, and we twist and rotate over to the left. Nice smooth rotation through the mid-ribs, through the mid-back. The feet and the hips are gonna stay stable, stay locked into place. And we twist. A couple more rotations from side to side. I'm gonna go one more right, one more left. I've got some folks that fell off of mute. If you can just check your mics, guys. Ah, that's perfect. I think we hit it. Thank you. And back down to the mat. Arms are going to come nice and long down by your side. Reset your feet and your hip position. We find that neutral. We'll work our pelvic tilt once again. It's just nice to work in and out of that flexion and extension as long as, especially the flexion, isn't contraindicated for anything that could possibly be going on in your spine. We want to feel the movement of the pelvis, the movement of the hips and the back, to feel the shift and the change along the spine as we move the hips into that posterior tilt and then into an anterior tilt, and how that causes flexion and extension in the spine. So we can help and feel where neutral should be. Coming to a nice neutral position. So I've got that little gap at the small of the back. The rib cage is knitted in nice and tight, so there's no rib flare. I'm going to hover and float the hips just off of the mat about an inch or two. I push into my feet, send my shins, my knees forward, and I float the hips up just off of the mat about an inch or two. I can feel the weight at the shoulder blades as the chest sinks down, and then the hips lower back to the mat. Arms reach long once again to keep the neck long and the shoulders down. Pushing into the feet, the hips lift just a little bit. And down. Just that small lift. Pushing into the feet, I like the feeling of those hamstrings activating and firing at the back of the upper leg. And now I'm going to try to lift a little higher. Keeping that neutral spine, I'm creating flexion at the mid-back. Just below the shoulder blades, they're at the mid-ribs. I lift a little bit higher. I'm about halfway, 3/4 into my full bridge. And connecting the feet to the floor. You want to feel good contact of the heel along the outside of the foot, across the ball of the foot, and through your 5 toes. So you have maximum contact with your mat, with your floor. And now coming all the way up into a full shoulder bridge. Ribs are down as the hips lift up and the knees go forward towards the feet, because we're creating movement in the ankle. We need that movement at the ankle so the knee, the shin, can pivot forward as we bring our hips up and through. If the knees don't go forward as the hips drive up, everything shifts up towards our head, and we lose that connection to the back of the legs and the back of our hips. We're pausing at the top for about 5 to 10 seconds. And we want all of the movement to be south of the midrib, south of the bra line and the pecs. So our shoulders are weighted and balanced to the floor. And if we can isolate all that movement to the mid-back down, we don't have to worry about having to reset the shoulder position, feeling like, oh, we just shrugged again. We can keep that length through the neck. Last one. Ribs in, abdominals are nice and tight. You can feel the stretch through the quads as you shoot the knees forward. We're pulling in through inner thigh. And we slowly lower down. Back to the mat. Arms are going to reach up overhead, palms up towards the ceiling, facing up towards the ceiling, working into our modified hundreds prep. Our arms are straight and strong as they flow forward to bring the head, neck, and chest up into that chest lift. And slow on the reset. You want the arms reaching out nice and long. So as you come up into your chest lift, once you hit that full lift, You're not having to fix your shoulder and your arm position. You should already be in place, and the arms should already be as long as you can make them, creating as much length in the neck and along the top of the shoulders, across the collarbone, and that stretch of the arm out of the shoulder joint. So you've already hit that straight arm position as you begin to lift the chest. So once you're fully up, there's really nowhere else to go. You've hit it. You're at your max length, at that max height. Last two. Arms come out to a T, palms up towards the ceiling, and we'll bring our right leg up to tabletop. Lock down into the rib cage, into your back and your abdominals. We're going to hinge at that right hip. For the foot to tap the mat. I'm working on a toe tap, so I'm in plantar flexion. If your calf tends to cramp or the lower leg tends to cramp, you can flex at the ankle. Drive the heel down towards the mat. You could play around with that position. Do a handful with a pointed toe, a handful with a dorsiflexed ankle for the foot pulled back. Right foot returns in line with your sit bone. The left leg comes up to tabletop position. Ribs and abs are in, and we're going to hinge at the hip. Feel the weight of the mid and upper back anchoring and weighting to your floor. Also the weight across the hips at the pockets. That's evenly balanced. There's not too much pressure on the right or left hip as this left leg moves. The knee is locked in at 90. There's no movement at the knee joint. It's only at the hip. Arms are reaching out nice and strong into that T position. And we'll bring that left foot down in line with the sit bone once again. Arms reach straight up towards the ceiling. We're going to work into our pelvic curl. So we're going to be bridging with the spinal articulation. We'll tilt the hips back so we can press and imprint the low back to the mat. Press through the feet as we peel and bridge, lifting the hips up, one vertebra at a time, and then slowly curling and articulating down along the mat, hitting each piece of our back all the way through to the tailbone. Now, if flexion in your spine is not appropriate for you, you stay in a neutral spine, just like that first set of bridges that we did. No articulation, no flexion in the low back. We're lifting the hips, sending the knees forward towards the toes. Feeling that stretch along the back as we move through one more bridge. And knees come to tabletop. Bringing our legs together at center. Arms come up overhead, palms facing upwards towards the ceiling. Straight and strong with the arms. And as the arms glide forward, the head, neck, chest lifts. And slow on that reset, back to the mat. Bringing your focus and your attention to that arm position so the elbows are straight, the arms are always reaching long, reaching down towards the end of the mat as you lift the head, neck, and chest. Three more. Shoulder blades are peeling up off of the floor. Draw the ribs in, knit in nice and tight. Tension into the abdominals, squeeze through inner thighs. Connect to your center line. And we hold that lift. Fingers interlace, hands behind the head to support the head and the neck. And we alternate single leg extensions. Nice and slow, reaching the legs forward one at a time. Full extension of that knee. Reach the leg out of the hip. Create that space, that air in the hip capsule as you drive the leg straighter and forward, farther away from you. Your head is fully supported by your hands, by your arms, so there's should be no tension at the neck. You should feel good engagement and support through the mid and upper back, across the shoulders. And we'll pause here at tabletop and add a rotation. We rotate over and onto that right shoulder blade and through to center. Tip and twist over and to the left and center. Nice smooth movement across the mid ribs, across the mid back as we swivel and twist through the upper back. The distance between our chest and our hips, the ribs and our hips, stays the same no matter which direction we are rotating to. We're not adding any extra flexion. One more to each side. And feet to the mat, in line with your sit bones, and slowly reset the upper body back to the floor. Arms are reaching down by your side as you bring the legs to tabletop, keeping some space between the knees for our leg changes. We're going to lock down into our torso, bring good tension into the abdominals, obliques, and back extensors, and we alternate our single leg lowers for leg changes. Now you could work one leg at a time or alternate them simultaneously. You could go hands to your hips if you're feeling a lot of play in your pelvis or in your back. Three more to each side. And we'll bring our feet back down to the floor. Let's bring our feet and our legs together to our center. Arms go out to a T position, palms up. And we're gonna lay our legs over to the right side. Look out over that left shoulder, that left arm. As we twist through the mid-back, through the mid-ribs. We'll come back to center and we're gonna tip and twist over to the other side. Look out over that right arm, that right shoulder. We'll do one more rotation to each side. Legs and hips, knees and feet kind of lean over to that right side. You're going to look out over that left arm and shoulder. I want you to anchor them through the mid-ribs up. So there's no lift of this left shoulder, left side of your chest off of the mat. And last one with hips and legs leaning to the left. Head and neck looks out right over that right shoulder and arm. We're finding that rotation through the mid-back. And we come to center. Fingers are going to interlace. We're going to return to our chest lift position. Head, neck, and chest will lift up, and we'll bring our legs up to tabletop. We're going to move into our crisscross. So right leg extends forward and upper body twists to the left. And we center up, back to tabletop, chest to center, and switch. Nice and smooth rotation through the mid-ribs. Trying not to rock off of your hip as you rotate and extend the opposite leg. Last one to each side. And we'll hug the knees in towards the chest. Let's reach for our toes and pull our knees apart. And we're going to rock from hip to hip, side to side of the spine as well, so we get some movement. And into a butterfly stretch, soles of the feet together, driving the knees out and away from you. And into tabletop. Arms are coming back up overhead, palms facing up towards the ceiling. As the arms flow forward, head, neck, chest lifts, we hold to straighten both legs forward. Bring the legs back to tabletop, and upper body resets to the floor. Focusing and tuning into your arm and shoulder position as you come up into that chest lift before straightening the legs. We want good engagement along the arm as we drive the legs forward. Three more. Feet coming down to the mat, arms long down by your side. Let's do a couple pelvic tilts where we rock the hips, move the low back, as long as it's appropriate for your spine, for your back. And we're going to come up into a bridge, peeling and curling up or using a neutral spine to lift the hips. We're going to stay up and stay lifted. We're going to lift off of our heels onto the ball of the foot, keeping the hips nice and high as we lift the heels. And then we're going to drop the heels to the mat and lift the toes up. Flat feet, heels lift. Heels lower, rock onto the heels, lift the toes. And flat feet. So we're moving in and out of neutral, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, moving at the ankle joint, trying to maintain that lift of the hip. So we get a little bit of movement in the height of the knees and the thighs, but there's not a lot of movement in the spine and in the height of the hip. Last one, pulling the top of the foot back, and we'll curl down with the toes up. Knees come to tabletop, hands resting at the side of the knees, and we fold at the mid-back, at the mid-ribs to lift the head, neck, and chest. For double leg stretch, legs move forward, arms reach up overhead, and we come back to center. Bracing and tightening through your core as the arms and the legs move away from your center, so you have that stability. Deeper fold at the mid-ribs, at the mid-back. Two more. And then the knees hug in. We're gonna curl and we're gonna roll up into our teaser prep position. So we're gonna curl up and float. Lean back just a little bit to make some space between your chest and your thighs. And if you're ready, arms come off the legs and we hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Feet come down to the mat into butterfly pose, and we'll fold forward, stretch forward, out over the legs. Letting the knees fall out to the side. You can add some upper body rotation. I'm going to rotate my right shoulder down towards my feet. So I look up towards the ceiling over my left shoulder. And then twist and rotate to that other side. I'll do one more rotation to each side. This time I'm going to move my left arm out of the way as I look up and back over that left shoulder. And same on the other side. Restacking the body, sitting up nice and tall. Right leg only will extend and straighten out. Your left knee will stay bent. You have your foot somewhere lined up with your lower leg. Arms come to the front, and we're going to tilt the hips back. We're going to curl and roll back. Now my right leg slides along the mat as I curl and roll back. Arms reach strong overhead, and then they come forward, head, neck, chest begins to lift, and we're going to curl and roll forward. Restack, sit tall, stretch long towards the ceiling, and hips tilt. Nice smooth movement of the back along the mat, piece by piece, vertebra by vertebra. You could work a flat back hip hinge if you need to stay away from the articulation, meaning you'd stay tall and long, and you just hinge at the hip, maintaining neutral. One more roll up. And then I'm going to twist this left leg out into external rotation. Flex at the ankle for the right leg. And roll forward, reach out over this right leg. Drawing the foot back towards the shin and the knee a little bit deeper as you press the leg down slightly. Try to lengthen the spine, draw the shoulders down. And now I'm going to twist this right leg. Whole leg is going to rotate from the hip, not from the knee or the ankle. My thigh is going to twist out, and then it's going to twist in. You may need to move your left foot out to the side a little bit to get more internal rotation, and then the leg twists out. Moving the leg in the hip, no twisting at the knee, no movement at the ankle. Everything is locked and cemented into place as you twist at the hip. If you've had a hip replacement, internal rotation may be contraindicated depending on how it was done, so I opt to usually avoid it for my folks that have had replacements. One more set of twists. And we'll restack the back and change leg positions. Left leg is straight. Right knee is now bent with that foot, more in line with your shin bone, so you have enough space. We start in a tall position. Remember, if you are not articulating, you are hinging with a flat back. Otherwise, we tilt the hips, we curl and roll down to the floor, reaching up long overhead with straight arms and no rib flare, and arms flow forward, head, neck, chest lifts. We're peeling up off the floor, one vertebra at a time. On this next one, we'll roll all the way up. And our right leg is going to drop out to the side into that kind of single-sided butterfly stretch. Angling the foot back towards the shin and the knee. We'll round forward over the leg to stretch. I move the right foot out of the way just a little bit so it's not butted up against my calf. And now this left leg is going to externally rotate. So it's all about the thigh moving at the hip and then internally rotate. No movement at the knee or the ankle or the foot. Everything is in line, and we twist. Both feet straighten, both legs straighten, and we slide the legs out about mat width apart. We start in a tall stacked position before going chin to chest, forward fold, and we curl and stretch forward out over the legs, reaching for the shins, the ankles, or the feet to reach forward, stretch out nice and long, full posterior stretch along the back of the legs and along the spine. And we restack nice and tall. Sitting up long and tall, stretching up towards the ceiling. Like there's a string pulling the top of your head and your spine up towards the sky. And once again, we go chin to chest, forward fold. We curl and roll forward out over the thighs, over the legs, reaching towards the feet. Feel the weight balance between both hips and up the back of the legs. And we curl up and we restack the spine, stretching up, stretching tall, reaching long. Last forward fold as you go chin to chest, folding at the mid-ribs, at the mid-back to curl and round forward. We want to make sure there's not excessive rounding across the shoulders. And we'll hold for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nice and smooth on that restack, sitting up tall, stretching long towards the ceiling. Sitting taller, sitting straighter. We'll hold this nice isometric hold. I want you to engage the muscles up your spine, along the extensors, along the back, to sit straighter and taller as you reach the legs forward for another 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, guys, awesome work today. Nice work.